Hey, y'all.
Hey, Chuck, thanks for joining us.
Sure, you bet.
Appreciate it.
I have a feeling all our problems will be solved after tonight.
I'm going to hold you to that, Brad.
Just for the record, that was Dustin. I'm optimistic, but I did not say that.
Dana, thank you for your quick reply on the bit with the clerk's office. Hopefully it'll work out all right. Lost me for a second.
All right, hello. Sorry about that. I was having connection issues here, Brookings. All right, it is 6:33, so I'll call this meeting to order. Who is clerking today?
I got you, Kyle.
Oh, awesome. All right, clerk, if you could please call the roll.
Harper, McGuire, Pasalacqua,
Here.
Store,
Here.
Summers,
Here.
Taylor,
Here.
Patterson.
Here. All right. Could I have a motion for the approval of the agenda?
So moved, Taylor.
Second, Summers.
All right. Is there any discussion about the agenda? Any additions? All right, seeing none. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Harper, McGuire, Pasalacqua,
Yes.
Store,
Yes.
Summers,
Yes.
Taylor,
Yes.
Patterson.
Yes. Okay, here's our next on the agenda is public participation. I see Micah McMahon. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay. Hi, good evening. My name is Micah McMahon, a corrections officer here at Champaign County. I've spoken to this board several times regarding various issues. One I consider most important is exactly why each of you are here tonight. I come before you to request that you not only recommend the satellite jail rehab, but you don't choose the easy route or do the bare minimum. Nearly 2 years ago, the Facilities Committee unanimously agreed with a plan to consolidate the downtown jail and the sheriff's office with the satellite jail. Unfortunately, COVID dashed any progress on this matter. The jail conditions at the downtown jail have only gotten worse. The main opposition against this consolidation have stated that we need to build programs, not jails. What these individuals do not understand is that with the current setup, satellite jail programs are limited. We only have one classroom in our jail with the current violence that is affecting our area. We have so many separations. The plan that was reviewed by the Facilities Committee did, it was a jail reform. It would have simply transferred the bed space from the downtown jail to the
Mr. McMahon, you're breaking up pretty bad. All right. Yeah, it looks like we might have lost Mr. McMahon. Looks like he's still logged in. I guess we just move on if I can't get that figured out. Could somebody move Jim McGuire to the panelist section? Brad?
I'm getting a message that he's having difficulties zooming in. Are you seeing him on panelists?
I'm in. Thanks, Kyle.
All right. All right. Yeah, looks like we lost connection with Mr. McMahon. Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? All right, seeing none, moving on to communications. Are there any committee members that have communications? Brad, you still just have your hand up from before.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Ms. Taylor?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if this is the right portion for this, but I just wanted to say that I do have to leave at 7 for another meeting. And I will finish watching this on tomorrow. So I'm sorry. It's not that I don't think this is important because I obviously do. But I just wanted to let you know. Thank you.
All right, is there anybody else? All right, seeing none, moving on to our new business, which is a discussion about the jail facilities. We do have here tonight the sheriff, Captain Voges, Dana Brenner, our facilities director, and yeah, we have Chuck Reifseg from the architecture firm that we've worked with for jail designs. As you guys might have received, there's a new master plan, I guess an updated facilities master plan for public safety, and reduced version. It's about, I think, about half as much as what the original estimate was. And I believe that was 2019. Is that correct? The last time we had a plan drawn up? Yeah. So, this is an important issue for us to tackle. This is something that, for years has been an issue for the county. We've had, 2 sheriffs make it very clear to us that facility space is inadequate. And, like was mentioned, it was an issue that we began to take up in 2019 and got kind of sidetracked by the pandemic. But I think this is a time that we need to figure out a plan, because right now we don't have a plan. We know what our problem is, but we don't have a plan in place. So the goal of this committee is to address that, and also kind of acknowledge that, we have space issues here. The way I see it is our space issues are related to separation. So it's not that we don't necessarily have volume of space, it's separation of space, and we also have a completely inadequate facility downtown. Did we, Sheriff Harmon, did you have comments you wanted to make?
We'll see where the conversation goes tonight. Obviously, Dana and Chuck and Carrie and I all got together to reduce. So we thought about what will it take at a minimum. Well, actually, I gave Chuck kind of a $15 to $20 million plan. And I said, hey, what can you do for this? And so he worked his magic. He came back. And in my opinion, and speaking with Captain Voges as well, that $20 million plan is the bare minimum that we would need to close the downtown jail and then consolidate into the satellite. That's not taking into account the original plan in 2019 or even before that, that gave more in line with jail standards, the space and things like that the renovation of the satellite jail would actually have. We're just talking about consolidation at this point. This $20 million plan really doesn't have anything to do with renovation of the existing space. It's just consolidation so we can all be under one roof. And so I think it's very important that we keep that in mind, is that, and I don't know how the committee feels about ARPA money. I know different people have different opinions, but that was kind of my goal, was if we could use $20 million of ARPA money, what could we justify using that on? And then making sure you guys have the information so you can make an informed decision then on if that's something we want to invest in with ARPA money, non-ARPA money, anything like that. But we did sit down and really think about what do we believe could be justified with this ARPA money. And that's really included in that $20 million proposal. But again, I want to be clear that this is not a solution to our long-term problems. This is a closing the downtown jail so no other correctional officers get injured. And then working on that other part after this one. So,
thank you. Chuck, did you want to comment on or field questions on the new plan the updated plan you put out?
Sure, I'm happy to field questions, and I like to reiterate what the sheriff just said too. The reason for the format of the report, with a lot of text still there but stricken, was to reinforce that this isn't a complete master plan. This isn't a complete solution for the detention issues of the county, but it does provide the minimum, as the sheriff said, to close the downtown facility. Happy to answer questions.
Mr. Summers?
Comment really more than a question at this point. I do understand that part of the solution for this is going to work out how we're going to pay for it. At this juncture, since we're
Steve, you froze up on me. All right. Until Steve gets his internet figured out, I'm going to go to Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Kyle. Actually, for the public, I'd like to, Mr. Eastek, explain what will be done with the $20 million, if he could, because I think it's important for them to understand what won't be accomplished. I did have a direct question. Excuse me. So the $20 million doesn't include the updating intake, or it does what classroom space, those types of things. Can you go over it?
Sure. Sure. So the $20 million solution would include 2 housing pods. The master plan that we presented a few years ago had 3 pods, but the 2 pods that would be added are envisioned to be quite flexible. So you have a lot of ability for separation of inmates by classification. There's a 26-bed pod that is all single occupancy cells, single bed cells, and those are include some medical isolation, and the worst behavioral problems could be in some of those smaller pods there, or smaller divisions. Then there's a 49-bed pod, again with a lot of separation that could house both females and males, and flexibility for those fluctuations in the female population when they happen. Within those pods, we envision that there would be indoor exercise associated with each of those. There'd be some visiting space that would help relieve some of the potential problems of visiting that are in the main facility now. This would be remote type visiting. There would be some new healthcare area, and that's really adjacent to the 26-bed pod, because most of those folks would be the ones that need a lot of the medical attention. And then we would hope in that budget we could create in the existing pods, the two existing pods in the satellite facility, trying to convert those outdoor recreation or outdoor exercise areas into indoor exercise areas so they can be used year round. The thought is that the existing healthcare area in the satellite facility could be then relocated to the new construction, and that with potentially other funds, if they don't fit in this $20 million budget, could be used to renovate that area into program space and possibly some administrative space as well. It does not, to answer your question, Jim, does not include changes to the intake area, but an advantage is that now, well, at least the time when we did the original master plan and the follow-up, those cells in the booking area were being used for permanent housing, and those would now not be needed for permanent housing. So in effect, you are making some positive changes in that area, but no walls, no other renovations are anticipated. No cost is anticipated to renovate that area at this point. Also included is a secure refuge area, which is just a fenced area out at the end of the facility that could be used in an emergency situation if a pod needed to be evacuated for fire or some other emergency use. And then also we've priced out some bollards, some crash bollards around the building. Haven't designed where those all go yet, but try to protect the building more than it is now from like the incident you had a few months ago. So that's what we currently have in the budget. Now, I will caution you that these are really difficult times to estimate cost. Availability of materials, cost increases for materials, all very hard to estimate right now. But we again consulted with Gilbane Construction as a national construction management firm to try to place a escalation factor on this that hopefully will cover those unknowns at this point. So that's factored into this cost as well. This is going to have to be a project just because of that factor alone. I think that as we get into design, we're going to have to continually monitor cost to see maybe we can get a little more than what's currently shown in this $20 million solution, or maybe we get a little bit less. But it's really a volatile time to be estimating costs.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. I think the public would like to know if this goes out on YouTube. And I'm glad that we're at least getting out of the downtown jail, which is crumbling around people's ears, unsafe, people are getting hurt. The next thing is you mentioned cost. A couple of years ago, we were talking about a lot more, probably for less cost. Now we're getting just the minimum for $20 million. It's a 23% increase in 2 or 3 years. Putting this off another year or so to even start the process, how much more do you think we would lose beyond the $2 million a year we're losing because we're housing people out of county? But the $2 million you probably don't realize. I mean, if we're housing 70 people out of the county, it's costing $2 million plus the increased cost of materials and construction year over year. And can you estimate that if we wait a year and a half beyond the safety issues and emergencies that we deal with?
Well, traditionally, escalation costs were 4 to 5% a year. So one would hope, from what I've been reading and hearing is that maybe by next spring, the market will have adjusted, manufacturers will be able to meet demand and that type of thing. So one would hope that you'd be back into a normal escalation of 4 to 5% a year. I would reiterate, Jim, that I think when we got, we did this initially about in, I hope I get this right, 2015, I believe. And when we were asked to revisit it in 2019, all the costs, nothing's really changed from the master plan. It's simply been price escalation year after year after year that have changed this from originally a 30 million, I think, roughly project to now, like you say, 20 just for the bare minimum. So the thing that's costing the most on this project over the years has just been time.
The cost is important, but the people that have been injured and the safety of the people that are incarcerated are even more important. But thank you.
Absolutely, right.
Captain Bogus, did you want to keep your hand up?
I did. I just wanted to say one thing, that the plan is the bare minimum, to the point that it concerns me a little bit that we're looking at a bed, the housing space that we are. I'm afraid that as soon as we build this, just so you guys are aware, and I put it on the record, that it's going to be full, because today the downtown jail, Yesterday I had 70, and we just sent 63. We just sent 8 to DOC. So we have 63 this morning, and you can figure out the math here. And I'm still going to be using Booking the way I'm currently using Booking. This is not going to change that. It's not enough space. It will eliminate the people at the downtown jail. My biggest concern is the length of time we're going to continue to be working with the pandemic. If we continue to have to face the quarantine housing that we're required right now, I don't know if we're still going to be housing out of county. And I wanted to put that out there for all of you to know that, because if I've got 70 at the downtown jail, which is where we've been averaging, all I'm going to do is just move them straight here, and then still use Booking the way we're currently using it, if that makes sense. And I wanted to open that up. So if you guys had any questions.
Mr. Pasalakwa.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mr. Reevestek. I'm very aware of what opportunity cost means, but now we're looking at the cost of procrastination, and that's horrible. And I don't like bare minimums, but at this point we're at a juncture where something has to be done. You made reference to healthcare facilities. Is that specific to physical healthcare or mental health separation units, or can you elaborate on what you mean by the healthcare sections of the design?
Sure. Well, there are some healthcare housing areas in our minds with these pods. There's right now 4 medical isolation cells that are single occupancy. These would be the type that, the air, the mechanical air that comes into the space is exhausted and that type of thing. So these, before COVID, these were the people, that had the real contagious diseases, and you wanted to isolate them. But there's also some smaller divided day room cell areas of 2 to 4 people that you might house some of the mental health patients, some inmates, and then there's also then an area for medical, counseling, doctors' spaces, exam spaces, things like that as well. So I think there'll be more opportunity to isolate, to segregate the folks that need to be segregated with the mental health issues into smaller areas and not into larger pods. So I hope that answers it. I mean, we're trying to make as many small divisions as we can so that Carrie has flexibility in how she houses inmates.
But thank you for that. And I think it was just really for the sake of the public that maybe isn't privy or doesn't take the time to look at the designs, that we could see that we have a nationwide shortage of addressing the public the mental health issues. We're not out of that game. I mean, we know that that's an issue. And so I think that these spaces are extremely valuable. And I think you and Dustin have paid really close attention to that. I appreciate that. But once again, I think the recurring theme here is the price of procrastination. So I appreciate this. I hate to do things by the bare minimum, but thank you for your information and your input.
All right, if nobody else has any questions, on page 5 of the report, number 5, it says inmate program space. There is a strike through the space to accommodate the needs of in-house and visiting programming staff would be included. Space provisions will also include creation of EHD, entry point, and parking. So with the reduced plan, is that essentially saying it's not reducing program space, it's just reducing space for the program staff would have in the EHD program?
It's not necessarily reducing anything. It's just taking it out of what the big plan was.
Yeah,
Chuck,
but
you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's not reducing what we currently have. It's just not adding what we originally planned on adding that program space.
yeah, I just meant reduction in the sense of from the original plan to this plan. Uh, so we don't really have detailed units, or I'm sorry, on the draw up of the plan for the new pods. It doesn't have any details for what the interiors would look like. Is that something that is not done, or could you kind of give us insight on what exactly
Sure.
it would look like as far as different units?
Well, and that's correct. I mean, this is a master plan document, so we aren't into that kind of detail yet and haven't done all that programming work that's associated. So, how would the healthcare area be designed? These would be questions that and interviews we have when we really begin a schematic design in the architectural process. But we did do some sketch work just to make sure that the pods that we were presenting would work. And in our minds, again, on sketches, we do feel we have, this will work as a 26 bed single occupancy type of pod with several different day room and cell groups in it. So you're right. That detail, and I don't think even to that level, we would need to further discuss that with jail staff and the sheriff and during design and make sure we're meeting their needs. Right now, it's based on more our thoughts than in detail, but just based on experience, we kind of know that a jail that houses this many people needs to have a healthcare area of this size, or and based on experience, we know that pods can be arranged so that we can have some direct supervision or indirect supervision, but where a station can be located to get a good view into all these areas. And we've just done preliminary sketching to make sure that we have some confidence in these blocks of space that are shown in the master plan.
There's a mention of the female population fluctuating pretty dramatically. I think the numbers cited are 6 to 31 that were documented in the 2015 master plan. Do we have current data on how much that fluctuation is, like in recent years?
Carrie, do you have that?
I can get that for you, Kyle. I don't have it in front of me. I do know we fluctuate. As of the last year, we've probably had less than 20 usually. There for a while, we were sitting at a very high number of around 31, but I can get that for you. I just don't have it in front of me right now.
Thanks. There's mention of designing this in a way that has ADA compliance. What does that mean exactly for jail? Like, I'm familiar with, ramps and handrails and stuff like that, but what is the context of ADA in the jail that you're trying to meet?
Sure. Well, we still need to meet clearances from doors, widths of corridors and things like that, but also providing cells that are accessible, showers that are accessible, toilet facilities that are accessible. These pods are envisioned as single level pods also, unlike the current satellite configuration of a two-story type of pod arrangement. So, the ADA touches all building design. And so there are standards for, how many cells, that type of thing, seating at tables where you might not have a fixed stool at that table, but a chair that moves. So those are the types of requirements we would need to meet with this new construction.
Mr. Storr.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Reestack. I read through the documents that you sent, and you did good explanation of how this will meet the American Correctional ACA cats helping. Did I understand that some of the pods were going to be flexible so that they can house different numbers of male versus female? How do you know? Can you explain yet how that happens?
Sure. Sure. Well, the biggest thing is we've got to have sight and sound separation between males and females. And, I believe now, Carrie, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think when you do have those spikes of females, you're using a unit not to its full capacity, but partial capacity, which thereby eliminates a lot of cells that you might use for males on other occasions. So the thought with the new pods is that we would have smaller divisions, groups of, maybe 8 beds in a unit, adjacent to another 8-bed unit, adjacent to another 8-bed unit. So when you have 8 females or you have 12 females, you're taking up 2 of those, 1 or 2 of those divisions. And on those spikes, you're maybe expanding into the 3rd one, but you're not losing a lot of bed space by expanding into it. And we, again, we just have to be sensitive to that. We have walls and separations and one-way glass and that type of thing so that we create that visual and sound separation between the males and females. We feel it can be done. I mean, it's kind of done that way in the satellite now, but the units are large enough that we lose a lot of that bed capacity to a few females, and we can't house males there. So we're just trying to break that up into smaller groups here in the new pod.
Mr. Patterson, if I may, another question. Mr. Reefstick, you talked about the medical units. Now, do these kind of have what you call single pass airflow, and how much of the jail will now have that?
Well, yes, that was the thought in those medical isolation cells. Now, with these were designed before we had a pandemic, and I don't think any of us envisioned something like this happening. So I think this needs to be revisited with the mechanical engineer during design to determine just what do we do with air everywhere? Do we handle things differently than we did before the pandemic? Again, based on experience, we felt at the time we had included this in the master plan was that, well, 4 medical isolation units with 1 pass air ought to be sufficient. I think that's a discussion we have to have further as we get down the road here. But yes, that's the plan with those. In normal times, that should have been sufficient.
Is this going to add considerably to the cost?
Well,
or just operations?
Yes, having 4 of those cells doesn't add significantly to the cost. But if we decide we need to do that for a lot, that does add significant cost, because all that air you're bringing in on a 0-degree day is 0-degree air that needs to be warmed up to 70 degrees. Whereas in the non-1 pass air areas, you're using some of that residual heat from the return air and bringing that back up to temperature. So yes, it's quite a bit more energy cost to do that 1 pass everywhere. But again, I think we need to continue to read about what is being done, study, talk with mechanical engineer, and determine what the best solution for Champaign County is. But I would doubt that it would be one pass air everywhere. Again, it's going to be probably limited to a few cells.
And this will likely be conventional HVAC as far as we know at this point.
Well, I think so. In the original estimate, well, I shouldn't say original. In the 2019 estimate, we were asked to show a cost increase to use geothermal instead of more conventional system. Again, again, it's kind of being, short-sighted to some degree, I think, though we can have pretty energy efficient conventional systems too. But when we're trying to create a facility with, with a $20 million budget max and trying to get the essential pieces there to close downtown, we do not have geothermal in the estimate right now. Again, I think this is something as we get into design and we know we have a firmer idea of the costs, we can evaluate and can we get a better system? Because again, this is something, it's a 24/7, 365-day-a-year facility, as we all know. So if a geothermal or a very efficient mechanical system would really pay for itself over a few years of the life of this building.
Could that be added on if it's not included in the current design, or is that I kind of getting out into the weeds again?
Well, I think that'd be a question for the engineers. You're either I would guess this building might have a chiller somewhere, and I think you'd be abandoning the use of a chiller to switch to geothermal wells. It probably isn't real cost effective to do that within a few years of the building being built, abandoning that system. But again, I think these are all questions, more detailed questions that we're going to have to evaluate during the design phases. And one, can we get it? Is there a way to, or can we partially get it? Or is there a way to make it adaptable? I'm not aware of an adaptable way to do it at this point. But an engineer might have a better idea on that.
Thank you. Mr. Patterson, I don't have any further questions at this time.
All right. Captain Bugs, did you have your hand raised, or is that from before? Mr. McGuire?
Thank you, Kyle. Just a quick question for Dana before I go back to Chuck. So we're going to have HVAC work done on the jail currently. Or have we updated the filters in the system to MERV 13? What is the current COVID changes that we've made?
Well, it's not a one-pass air system, certainly. We are putting chillers on top of the roof with new air handlers. They do have HEPA filters that do filter out there. So it'll be a better system than is currently there. It'll be a more efficient system, certainly, and save on utilities. It is not, an in-ground system as Chuck was mentioning. Very difficult to retrofit those systems into buildings that are in existence. It's a lot easier to put those systems in when you're building it and you're planning for it. It becomes quite expensive if you can do it and have the room for it later on. But there are systems out there that are quite efficient and do a good job of scrubbing the air.
Great. Thank you. Going back, if you're done, to Chuck and Captain Bogus's statement about being at capacity as soon as we open the building, which seems to be what we've done over the last 20 years, is build buildings that weren't really capable of performing the responsibility we're building the building for, in both jails, the satellite jail also. it doesn't seem to be much of a deterrent to crime to have a jail that's full that you can't send people to. And obviously with what's going on in our community, and as the county, we're responsible for housing these inmates and housing them safely and having our staff safe. My question though, Chuck, is a timeline. You mentioned the planning of the 2 pods that Chris asked about. So we have, drawing plans, putting it out for bid. We have construction. Can you tell us how much time that will take, step by step, so the public understands this? We may support consolidation soon, but having an actual building to occupy might take a little time.
Sure, Jim. The reason I did the escalation factor to spring of 2023 was I did kind of guessing a timeline, knowing that the process of the county board determining what to do we have the resources and funds to do it, so I kind of assumed you would, deliberate a few months here in 2021 to determine that. And then I thought probably the architectural process, the design, the construction document preparation would probably be about a 10-month process. Then bidding and getting under contract with contractors is probably about a 2-month process. So, again, if we were given the notice to start, say in November of this year, that's getting it bid and under contract with a contractor, like November of next year. And that's always kind of an iffy starting point. So I was trying to be safe with the escalation by going out until spring. Now, can a month be saved here or there to speed things up? Probably. But that's just kind of a estimate of time based on experience, Jim. So, probably a year from say go to having bids in hand and contractors on board.
And then the construction timeline, how long would it take to construct?
Oh, good question.
Just an estimate's fine with me.
I know I've talked about that with Gilbane, and I'm kind of definitely going from memory here, and we were thinking it's about 18 months.
It's almost 3 years. 18 in a year, 18 months in a year from today. I mean, and we're just blowing smoke here right now. Then if we waited till the 22 election, it would be 3 years later than that, right? So we'd have a year and a half, 4.5, 5 years before we had any place to put anybody. And we'd be paying $2 million a year. The safety issues of the jail, safety issues of the public, and the cost would increase effectively by 50%. So it'd be $30 million. Is that a pretty sound estimate?
Is that a question?
Yes, if it would be, because that what would happen if we waited for an election in 2022, then started the process again about discussing the jail, whether we were going to do one, whether we were going to add additions, and whether we were going to move forward. So you're talking another year for planning and bidding, and then 18 more months after probably January, February, by the time they even started the discussion in 2023. So you're looking at 2025. And the additional cost again. How much, we're talking about $20 million now, but at 23% in 3 years, that'd be almost 50% or more in that time frame.
Yeah, I think, so if I'm following you, Jim, and I'm trying to, I think, I'm hoping that escalation figure stabilizes back at, say, let's just say, 4 or 5% after, after next year. So, I think you'd have to look at the $20 million figure that is probably good until the beginning of 2023. And then if you've got that year, you're adding another 5%. If you're into 2024 before it's being built, it's another 5%. So does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I wanted a better idea of what it would be if it had to wait, if it wasn't really started until 2025. So even 20 or 30% above what we've got right now. So 20 million down to 2 million, 4 million, 10%. We're at $25 million or greater by the time we get to, and that's just an estimate. That's just the cost of delaying the project longer beyond the bigger issue that we've discussed, the emergency that's the downtown jail that's going to crumble.
Yeah, and I haven't been in that. I'm sorry, Jim. I haven't been in the downtown facility since we did our initial audit of conditions in 2015, but it was bad then. I'm surprised Dana can continue to make that place run. Because we thought several things were at their life at that point.
Okay, I see other hands, so I'll hold more questions to see. Thank you, Chuck.
Mr. Summers.
I just wanted to speak to Jim's comment about having additional discussions after 2022. My hope is that we're having the discussions that we need to have right now. I understand that with the timeline we're looking at and the need to close the downtown jail, I don't envision us pushing this can down the road any farther at all. We need to come to a decision. In fact, we've been charged as a committee to come to a decision by November. We need to take this to the board, and we need to then be able to move forward so that the process that Chuck's outlined can start as soon as possible. I just think that a conversation about talking about additional discussion and revisiting in 2022 is not going to work with the problem that we have right now. We don't have the luxury of that time. Thank you.
Wanted to respond. Well, thank you, Steve, for saying that, because I know this is an emergency. We need to get this accomplished. It's just I'm hopeful that as we speak about it, as we have, that the public will understand that too, because we know there are people that will not support this and have not in the past. And I don't want to see it delayed. I know you don't want to see it delayed because of the emergency it is. So appreciate that.
All right. So with our current units that we have with the existing pods at the satellite, how many units are in each pod? Or I'm sorry, each pod has multiple units. How many beds, or I imagine might vary, are in each unit?
Do you want me to answer that, Chuck, for you?
Yes, please, because I don't have that information here at my fingertips.
It does fluctuate, Kyle. It depends on which housing unit we're talking about. I'll give you just a quick example. A pod, which is where we have the females at right now. The first unit, for example, could hold 7. Another one could possibly hold 14. And then immediately it jumps up to around 27 and then 27. Right now in A pod, they're broken down, just to kind of give you an idea, as A1 and A2. A1 and A2 are currently being used for female housing. A3 and A4 are currently being used for quarantine. So we have 2 units of 27 each that are being used for quarantine housing right now. they used to be general population. And so because of COVID and us having to quarantine them, we are currently no longer using them for general population. Now, if you go to BPOD, BPOD is going to be set up a little bit different too. If you guys remember doing your tours with us, BPOD had the open bunk setting. So if you remember how they had the bunk beds kind of filed in, it's a little bit different. So you have 2 units in there that do not have doors. So those can only be used for a certain classification as well. And then you have units B1 and B4 that both can hold around 27 each as well. So they're not the small units that we need, where you can hold 8, 10, 4, which is what we're proposing for that special management housing.
Have we explored the possibilities of dividing the current larger units? Would that meet the needs of both ADA and separation?
That was discussed, and actually it's part of the bigger plan. The bigger plan actually has that as part of the remodel piece of it, but we could not do the remodel at this point as long as we have the downtown jail open. You're going to have to move people out of county in order to do the remodel. But that was part of the grand scheme of things, is that eventually what you would do is we still have to have those additional housing units, but it would help us in the future to try to separate our people right where they're at. Because really the 27 beds aren't working for us now. I'll give you an example. Today we had an inmate fight where we had to take 4 people out of the unit because they cannot be with those 27, but I don't have space to put those 4. Because I have no space downtown and I have no space to put them right now at the satellite. So we currently just have them housed in booking. So in the big plan though, Kyle, it was put in there as though we would divide them up and we would remodel each housing area. Am I correct, Dana? Am I leaving anything out? I don't think so. I don't know if you heard me. So does that answer your question though, Kyle?
So are you saying that that renovation is not in the plan we're looking at today?
It is not that I'm aware of. Am I correct, Sheriff? And you guys took that piece out.
You're correct. Yep, that's not in the current plan.
Renovation of existing space alone will not close the downtown jail. We need those extra pods in order to do that.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, I wasn't trying to insinuate that would be a solution to our problem. It just seems like an aspect that would make it more workable in the long run. Do we know what the costs were for those renovations involving dividing existing units?
Chuck, they were in the last one we did from 2019. We had them broken down on that back page. I don't know if they're there anymore.
And well, I've got them, I've recalculated it too on the last page of the current report. That there's a second group of spaces called renovations. One of those line items was safer existing housing, which sort of would have been raised control posts and related areas where some of that extra separation was coming in. And let me follow this across. That's about a $1.1 million project. Now, I know we were doing some of that. One of the problems of creating a lot of new separations in those existing pods is that each unit needs, shower, toilet spaces. So it can get pretty extensive. So I think we were being relatively limited with how much division we were going to try to create in those existing pods, just because of the cost associated with all that plumbing. And you'd be losing then capacity as well, because probably an area used as a cell now would be turned into an area that's a toilet shower area off the day room. So so there's some of that, but it doesn't get to where we are with the new pods of having 4 and 6 person units.
And do we have any numbers on, or have we done any estimates on what the operational cost savings would be to consolidate to the one? I mean, obviously, you know, we're in a situation where we're paying to send a lot of people out of county, and I understand that that would be part of the savings, but are there other aspects?
So obviously we would have aspects of not transporting laundry back and forth, not transporting food back and forth, all of those things that we're doing. I would hesitate to say that there would be, you know, there may be a few personnel savings. For an example, we have 2 master controllers at each facility for 24 hours a day now. We may not need that many at that point, but I would hesitate in saying that we would significantly reduce staffing, because quite honestly, our staffing levels are critical right now, with only 1 correctional officer in a pod and those types of things. And that's happened. Carrie, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but 2008, 2009, whenever we reduced staffing for budgetary issues and things, we took it from a more robust staffing to bare minimum. And so that's really, you know, one correctional officer that may have to go into a pod of 27 up to 70 people is probably, you know, it's not safe. And so those could be used at other places.
Yeah, Kyle, we won't lose any staffing. That won't cost us any different with this addition or this expansion part of it. Clearly, if we're going to have a unit that's specialized in medical and mental health, you're going to have more officers in that unit as well. So even the master control units at this point, depending upon how we have the control panel set up for the additional housing units, we may very well need 2 controllers there as well. So I do think that you're going to save some costs, like he said, on the movement piece of it, but I'm not 100% sure how much the cost is going to change. I'm sure we're spending more money in an old building like we are with the type of HVAC we have, electricity we have. Dana, I would assume so. Again, I could be wrong, but I would think it would save some, Kyle, not probably a whole lot.
Well, Kyle, I would add in addition to that, you know, every time we have to take an inmate out of the jail and transport back and forth or something like that, we're causing a safety issue. There's always more at risk of a safety issue and things. And so the more we can keep them in house under one roof is going to be, you know, better safety wise too. So.
Mr. Storer?
Thank you, Chair. First, a comment. I want to thank Dana for distributing materials ahead of the meeting. That was very helpful. Gave me time to look over some things. Does anybody know what the cost of the demolition for the downtown jail would be? And is that in the estimate for the plan?
That is, the demolition of that facility is not in my cost estimates right now. Though I believe, Dana, we did pull a number for that a few years ago.
Yeah. That number is somewhere in the magnitude of 800,000. And that was from 2 years ago. You know, I don't think that's going to have quite the escalation in terms of what building materials and construction has had in the last 1.5 to 2 years. So I think that's going to be a fairly, you know, a good estimate for what it would be required to take it down.
Would we, once we get started on that, the demolition would not happen until after we completely evacuated the sheriff's, unless the sheriff leaves early, which or the inmates do. We really can't leave a building abandoned in the center of Urbana.
I would concur. I don't think you can leave the building, board it up, and just let it sit there for a year or two. It will be difficult to sell that property if you were just trying to sell it with a building standing. It would devalue the property because the new owner would have to tear it down. Likelihood of them trying to salvage any portion of it's, you know, a definite no. So, yeah, we'd have to tear it down. It'd be our best interest.
Thank you. Back to you, Kyle.
Mr. Summers?
I think at this point, we just need to stay focused on what we need to do to be able to get the prisoners out of the downtown jail. What we do with the facility after it's out and the sheriff's office is closed is another matter, but it does not have the same magnitude of potential downside that leaving things as they are do. So let's just focus and kind of stay in our lane and what we're trying to talk about here. In terms of Kyle's comment about cost savings, I think the reason we're not going to see cost savings because the sheriff's office, frankly, his staff is not at an appropriate size because of loss of experienced staff and difficulty in retaining staff. I think we will likely be looking at cost savings down the road when his department is fully staffed, but we're not going to show immediate savings because of the state that his staff is in right now in terms of simply not having enough people to adequately man the facilities. Thanks.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments? I noticed there's several county board members who are here as attendees. Would any of you like to make any comments or ask any questions?
All right, Kyle, I did have one thing when Jen's done.
All right.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to thank everybody for the time you're putting into this. It's obviously a very complex issue. And it's very needed. So thanks. That's all.
Mr. Esri.
Yes. Thanks, Kyle. I too would like to just thank everyone for being here, and the other board members are like myself, just been watching. I guess I'm a little bit disappointed to a degree that we're looking at just the bare bones, especially when we hear from Captain Vogus that likely it potentially be full if the bare bones was to go through. Granted, it hasn't happened yet, but if it was to go through, that it would potentially be full from the get-go. But yet I do understand the idea that the bare bones is probably about all that we can, I guess, kind of, to put it this way, maybe sell to the public at this point in time. So at this point, with that said, I would definitely be in favor of at least doing the bare bones. I would like to see it maybe a little bit more than the absolute bare bones, but I totally agree that we do not need the whole hog flushed out plan at this point in time. So that's, and I guess one other comment, just real quick, the idea that this has been the can, I guess you could say, has been kicked down the road for a long time. And this is, to me, the most ideal time to take care of this issue that we could possibly have. So I truly believe that we need to get this done now. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron. All right, does anybody else have any comments? Mr. Summers.
When I made my comments initially, I think I lost my connection. So please forgive me if I'm redundant, and I've already gone over this. So I wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to say it. We need to determine the plan in terms of how we're going to pay for it. I think that's a decision that our finance committee and the full board are going to have to look at. I'm not comfortable at this point in terms of saying that ARPA money is going to be used exclusively for this, or even our ARPA money is going to be used for it. We're here to determine the plan, and how we're going to pay for it will be up for the board and the finance committee later on. I just wanted to make sure that that's out there. Thank you.
Mr. McGuire. I'm sorry, I think I was muted. Maybe Mr. McGuire.
Sorry, thank you. That said, that I'd like to know what other money is available other than ARPA funds. Maybe the sale of the downtown jail property. But if this is the emergency that we've been talking about, discussing it or waiting longer to try to figure out where money might show up from, as we've done the last 10 years, doesn't fix the problem of the public safety concerns that we have with the shootings. We have places for those people to go, or the fact that it's unsafe for both the inmates and the staff. That even with this $20 million, we don't address some big issues I know other county board members would want, which is an intake that just brings people in and leaves, and they don't stay. It's a much better intake that is in the master plan. It doesn't address the space for organizations to come in and serve the people that are there. This is a bare bones jail that may not work, to house as many people as we need to. We're making decisions about funding when we have $40 million worth of ARPA funds. We have some pretty well listed out social issue programs that we want to fund, which will help that end. But I'm tired of the shootings in the county. Thank you.
A quick question for Mr. Reifsick. Kind of back to the question I asked earlier about that this plan does reduce some space that would be related to programming. Now, would that be like office space for programming staff, or would that be programming space?
Well, I'm not sure I completely understand.
I'm sorry. I'm referring to on page 5, number 5, inmate program space. Some of the portion is crossed out, as in it was part of the 2019 plan. It says space to accommodate the needs of in-house and visiting programming staff would be included. Now, is that like office space for them to like get organized, or is that space where they would do actual programming with inmates?
Well, I think it could be both. Again, what needs to happen is a programming exercise here with, it's probably not the right term to use, but that architects call determining what spaces you need kind of a programming exercise. So, but we would need to, we will have that existing healthcare space available for other use. And that would be a discussion with the sheriff and the jail staff about, okay, what do we need to, how much square footage do we have? What could we accommodate in that? So is it classroom space? Is it office space? Is it some administrative space? Those would all be things that would need to be discussed and determined, but it could be any or all of those things. And again, we aren't reducing anything that the jail has now. It was just a reduction of what was originally shown in the master plan.
Captain Bogus, did you?
Yeah, the original master plan had a complete remodel of the booking area in which we had added space specifically for office space and specifically for EHD and reentry, so that they would have programming space, or Champaign County healthcare consumers could have space there to actually work with their clients versus in the hallways and program. If programs came in and they wanted to do a one-on-one, they could do it. That's the space that we were kind of talking about, with the understanding that if we move the healthcare unit to the new area, that we could hopefully remodel that entire healthcare unit to become another classroom. Because when I've done tours with you guys, I think I told you that it'd be better for us to have at least 2 classrooms. And we have to remember that if we are moving the downtown individuals to the satellite, that we're going to need to have that program space in order to maintain the amount of programs that we used to have between both facilities, if that kind of makes sense.
And so to clarify, that additional space that wouldn't be part of the current plan we're looking at, is that was going to be a part of a whole section that's just not going to be built, or is that area that'll be used for something else?
That area will not even be remodeled at all.
Okay. All right, Mr. Summers.
Yeah, just a brief comment. I want to make sure that Member McGuire understands that when I'm talking about the financing piece, I'm just talking about the goals of our committee in terms of moving forward. I am committed to coming up with a proposal to bring to the board by November, and for the board to be able to take action in December of this year. I'm not kicking the can down the road. So just to make sure that that's clearly stated as well. Thank you.
Mr. Pasalacqua.
Thank you. I have to agree with Mr. Summers 100% that this is not something for future years. This is something that has to be addressed right now. I can't agree with that more. In light of the ARPA funds, which is a very unique situation we're put in, we know that's a finite amount of money that expires. And this is a very unique problem as well. This is not a budget item per se, at least not at the moment. Many other issues may be covered by different city entities as well as the county. This issue is unique to our county. This is a very deserving and a qualifying project under the terms of ARPA, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't give this a very strong percentage of our ARPA funding, because this is a true infrastructure problem. It does have COVID ties with separation, and to ignore the ARPA money and to go to the taxpayers again, those same taxpayers that have been betrayed by this board for many years, it would be unfair. And I think we'd be missing the boat to not take advantage of ARPA funds for this project. Thank you.
All right, is there anybody else who'd like to comment? Mr. McGuire?
Just quickly, thanks, Steve, for those comments. Will we have some meeting discussing the financing and what's available?
Yeah, so our next meeting, which is actually the next agenda item, is going to essentially be the same time next month, the day before ELUC. Sorry, give me a second. I want to be able to give you the exact date. I believe it's going to be the 6th. And my goals for that meeting is to have a discussion on the different options, because I think that when you look at the possibilities, there are a lot of different avenues for funding. It's not simply, a revenue increase. We have, bonding space, and there's some bonding space that's going to open up down the road. So I think that it would be, important to be able to have that discussion with Tammy and, those who are kind of experts in, what our financial situation is.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, obviously that's a huge aspect of this is, figuring out how the financing would work. All right, if there's no more questions or comments, going to move along on the agenda, and we just have for other business, like I said, date at the next meeting. I was able to speak with Megan today, and we were able to do that on the, like I said, on the 6th, and same time. And my hopes for that meeting is for us to be able to have a robust discussion on, what the different funding possibilities would be for a project like this. All right, next on the agenda is chair's report, which I do not have one. And seeing no other, Mr. Brenner.
Kyle, I just wanted to see if there's anything that For the 6th, October 6th meeting, is there something else that you would like, or the committee would like brought to them for discussion purposes? Any materials that, either we've produced in years past or something that is missing from anybody's perspective?
Does anybody else have any comments? I would say, like I said, I think it's important for us to really look at the different financial options, and that means looking at what our bonding space is, what the timeline is on when current bonds are going to be completed. Also, I think it's important for us to look at the what the possibilities are with ARPA funding. Whether or not the different aspects of the project meet qualifications. Yeah, anybody else have anything to add of what you would like to be included next month? All right, doesn't look like it. Seeing that there's no other business, I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to adjourn this meeting.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Thanks everybody who came out.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
for participating.
Thanks, Kyle.